Thank you, Louise. We'll answer any questions about the materials after the session, but without further ado now, I need to introduce a couple of people who've played big roles in creating their change teams within their organisations and leading the culture work within organisations. So first of all, we have Alfredo Thompson, who is from North Middlesex University Hospital, and hopefully we can have Alfredo on camera. And also Abi Blake, who's Interim Director of OD for Mid and South East Essex Hospital Trust. And they're going to join me just for the next few minutes, just to answer a few questions about their experience of working with this programme and the tools. So first of all, I'm going to go to Abi. And Abi, can I ask how within your organisation you got started with the work, and were there any tools that were particularly helpful?
Thanks, Sue. So we at Mid and South Essex is a newly formed trust. So we merged from 3 acute trusts in Essex in April 2020. So our culture programme was started to kind of help support the merger, as well as responding to the other needs that there were in the organisation. So we had our plans and everything signed off in January 2020, and then COVID happened. So we adjusted those plans to think about having more of a well-being support alongside them. So we kind of re-evaluated our plans at that point. So we did, instead of having a traditional change team, we set up a peer support network. What we call our MSE Buddy Network. We set it up in collaboration with a colleague from the Tavistock and Portman Hospital to make sure that we had the psychiatric support in place to ensure that as our team was going out, the network was going out doing the work, that they could have well-being conversations with staff and peer support conversations at the same time as being a vehicle for our culture change work. So that was kind of a big difference in the way that we used the change team. We also had the challenges of trying to do some pretty significant staff engagement. Apologies for the person who's joined. So we had a really big challenge around how we go out into the organisation and engage staff meaningfully and authentically whilst we have a global pandemic. And we're a hospital with kind of red zones and green zones, and very quickly no green zones. So we adapted. We knew that we weren't going to be able to do focus groups in the way that we wanted to do them, so we've continued to use buddy conversations as a source of that kind of really rich data. We also did the board interviews slightly differently as well, because we had essentially 3 boards coming together into one, so we had a lot of people to interview, and had to adjust the questions slightly to think about people who were potentially not on a board but were still actively involved in decision making and senior leadership for the organisation, because we had a different setup. So we've also found the leadership behaviour survey incredibly useful. So it showed what it shows most places, right, which is that everyone thinks that they're a great leader but nobody else is. But the real kind of benefit of it really was the free text responses. Gave us such a rich source of data, and one of our intentions behind doing this piece of work was to develop a new set of values and a behaviour charter for the new organisation as it is now, and that data and the engagement around that has really given us the language of our staff to use, so that we know that what we're putting back out to the organisation will reflect what they're telling us meaningfully. So the other aspect, the other tool that we really kind of took and developed a bit further was the dashboard, the culture outcomes dashboard. Somebody mentioned earlier on, I was part of the culture team. So when I moved into my role at MSE, I was able to kind of bring that learning. So one of the things that we did was take the dashboard, which I think the team will say, to be fair, needed some kind of visual development. And whilst it's the metrics in it are so useful, actually application of the dashboard and helping other people in the organisation to understand it. I wanted to do a bit of development around that. So we worked closely with colleagues in teams that deal with data a lot more than I do, and they helped us develop that. So we've got something that now we think that can be usable as a live dashboard that we can update with the annual and more regular data and use to make decisions and direct focus and that kind of thing around our OD strategy as well. So that was really helpful. I think what I would say is going from 3 trusts of kind of 4,000-5,000 to being, you know, having about 18,000 staff, it was really challenging to think about how to do the engagement in a meaningful way during everything that was going on. We did do some fun things. So we had in August, we did an ice cream event where all of our different sites had free ice cream for the day. But whilst they were queuing up for the ice cream, socially distant, of course, whilst they were queuing up for the ice cream, we made them tell us stuff. So we gave them questions to answer and we talked to people, and so that we could get that kind of actual in-person interaction. I would say the areas that we didn't explore as much from the tools were around patient experience. That became very challenging to do any kind of fresh patient experience. We of course use data, but that's something I think we need to look at into the second year of our programme. And the leadership workforce analysis. We knew that we've got a big piece of work to do around talent management, so that feels like a next phase thing for us. That's kind of the how we've used the tools. I think I would say that the probably the biggest impact is our change team, right? In terms of sustainability going forwards, the interviews and all of the data that we got through the survey and what have you, very useful, and hopefully we'll come back to those things to refresh our understanding of culture when we come to do that. But in terms of the sustainability and the long-term impact in our organisation, I think that the Buddy Network has made a huge difference.
That's brilliant, Abi. Thank you. Loving the idea of ice cream day and also a guest appearance from a furry friend there, which is marvellous. Well, welcome, furry friend. So, of course, Alfredo now has to compete with that. And actually, one of the things I think the team here learned over the years, Abi, was very much around the importance of the change team. It's not just about tools, it's about how you work with them and who you use to who you work with as you implement them. So Alfredo, can I bring you in at this point just to say a little bit about how your change team worked and what you actually did to build in genuine inclusion and make sure that you got a change team that was diverse.
Thank you very much, Sue, and I also have a little furry friend in the background, so if you hear noise, I do apologise. In terms of our change team at North Mid, I think just to set a little bit of context, so North Middlesex is in northeast London, or north central London, apologies. We have just about 4,000 staff. About 68% of us identify as ethnically diverse. So we're probably one of the most ethnically diverse NHS organisations out there. So it was really important for us when we were selecting the culture team to make sure that we had representation. We originally went out for 20 slots. And we were very surprised that we had over 50 people wanting to attend. So based on the applications that we received, we then had to make sure that we segmented the organisation and the participation on the culture team based on staff grades, staff professions, as well as all the other protected characteristics. It was really, really important for us to get the voices of as many people as we can participating in the different activities during the diagnostic and design phases. what was really powerful was being in a room really early on, and it was the only time, and Abi was there because Abi was helping us centrally as well in terms of NHSI, when we all agreed that that was the only time we would use our job titles because everybody was important. So we did that once in terms of contracting the team, and then we had lots of really important, healthy discussions around staff experience, around the culture in the organization. And our culture team is comprised of a healthcare support worker all the way through to a consultant anaesthetist and now a consultant pediatrician. So as we progress in terms of sustainability of the group, we have more people who want to participate and make the change a reality. I've seen a number of my colleagues are also on the call, so if you're interested as well, more than willing to expand the group. So please help us change and shift the organisation.
Okay, so just a follow up for you there, Alfredo. How are you managing to sustain the change team, and how are you keeping it sort of fresh, engaged, and diverse?
North Mid again was probably one of the most impacted hospitals in the country when it comes to COVID. So a lot of the work that we did, we had to park for all the right reasons. It is about me walking the floor and being really visible and maintaining contact with lots of the team members. But it's also about me being a conduit between the culture team and also the board, and also making sure that the discussions and the agenda and the priorities actually keep on happening in the organisation. I think contextually, somebody mentioned it earlier, it is about making sure that we move with the context of the organisation. We're just embarking on our on our continuous improvement process, and it's what we've found and what we've noticed is that by aligning ourselves to the continuous improvement methodology, the whole culture agenda has taken a new life and has taken off new momentum. So I think one of my proudest moments in the probably 2+ years that I'm doing this is having the staff survey being published and the chief finance officer running to the office asking for the results for his directorate of the staff survey. And I think that in itself says a lot, that, you know, being in meetings where the chief financial officer or the chief operating officer in our case is talking about culture and talking about it as eloquently, as passionately as we are, is a real testament to that.
Okay, thank you so much, and great to hear about your finance director being so enthusiastic about the results of the staff survey. So we do have time for a few questions, and I'm just looking at, I've just been pinged what some of those questions are. So I think we'd had a question from Stephen Weeks and Abi. Would you be happy to answer that? Stephen's question was about organisations in the process of merger. Are there specific modifications to the approach when there are different cultures coming under one structure?
Yes, we had lots of conversations about this. So I guess what I would say is I think from my understanding and my experience of doing this work, it doesn't matter if you're a merging organisation or not, you will have multiple cultures going on in your organisation. So there is no one homogenous culture that we're doing this work around. So that's firstly to start off with thinking about going into this, regardless of whether you're a merging trust or not, is to think about understanding that there will be pockets of different cultural behaviours. That's one thing. So the second thing is, yes, we did adjust it. So I mentioned about the kind of the board interviews and how we needed to adjust that because we merged in the programme. So we started the programme and then we merged. So that was a big part of it, how we communicated with the leadership of the trust and how we thought about the impact of having kind of that different leadership approach, because we were a group of hospitals. So, and that was the other thing that is, I suppose, slightly different as well. So we've been a group of hospitals for a number of years that had started working together. So there was some joined up working already, but we definitely had to make sure that we were explicit around taking the best from the 3 into the 1. So for us, it's not so much about adjusting what we did, but adjusting how we talked about it to people, because I think a thing that people were concerned about with mergers is this one place taking over elsewhere, and making sure that what we're creating, into what we're crafting, the culture that we're all crafting together at MSE, is our new identity as MSE, not one of the legacy organisations in kind of enforcing a culture onto another one. And that has, I think that we have been successful in that, and I think a big part of it was around that identity thing with the values and behaviours. We needed to move away from who we were before and think about who we are now as an organisation. So there's been a lot of work around new strategy for the organisation, objectives which are for us now as One Trust, values for us as One Trust.
Yeah, so genuinely creating that sense of this is a new entity. I think many of us have had that experience, haven't we, of merging, and it can feel different. I
was just going to say, the other thing that my team has done is there's with the move to a new operating model, we made sure that there was OD support wrapped around that, so that people going through the process of merger and restructure and that kind of thing have some development around their new roles and what have you once they've moved as well. So that's something that is linked in with our culture team as well.
Okay, again, if people are particularly interested in that aspect, would you be happy to share some of that experience after this conversation, Abi? And possibly we could glean some more for our new shiny website. So thank you for that. Alfredo, I have a question from an old colleague, apparently, Shireen, who asks, how much exposure and interaction do the culture team have with board members, and how is the work championed by the visible leaders within the organisation?
Oh, thanks, Shireen, and great hearing from you. Shireen was also part of our culture team initially. So it was really important that the culture team has continuous contact with the board. So I remember we had to prepare what's called fairly junior staff in order to interview the board and to sit and have conversations with the board. I think the board at that time and still are quite open to having that contact. We made sure that members of the executive team were at most of the events that we held initially. Whether at the start or the end of the event, it was really important for the executive team in particular to be there and to answer the questions and to really hear it firsthand in terms of some of the experiences and stories that our staff had experienced and were telling. It's really important moving forward as well that for tomorrow, as an example, the interim chief executive is meeting with the culture team just to talk about, what our priorities are over the next 6 to 12 months and how the culture team plays a role in that. The culture team is really important because what I've seen is a shift in terms of decision making, particularly around the people agenda. So we went from we'll make the decisions in a closed room to well, have we tested the ideas out with the culture team? Have we tested these initiatives out with people who want to participate in the process? So one of the real life examples is around, we've just created a new what we call a recruitment charter, which is all based around fairness of the recruitment process. So we have an issue with fairness in the organisation is one of our cultural priorities. We came up with initiatives and plans, and the chief executive challenged us, hold on a minute, before we implement this, I want to hear it from the culture team that they think this is a good idea. I want you to go out and test it. I want to speak to them myself. So it's really important to have that visibility and that contact continuously.
Okay, that's wonderful. I think we've got just a couple more minutes before we need to move on to the next section. And I'm just seeing if we've got any further questions. I think to both of you and to Alfredo first, in this case, we know that culture change, genuine culture change, takes time. What one piece of advice would you give to anybody starting out on this journey?
Oh gosh, I think it's just remembering that. I think it's just remembering the fact that you may get pressure from your executive team if they really don't understand the process. That this isn't overnight. This will take time, and I think the other advice is to learn to balance the politics. How do you stay true to the lived experiences that you hear as part of the diagnostic phase, while theming that so that it doesn't create antibodies? So it really does take that balancing between being authentic with what you're hearing and feeding back without losing it, really.
Okay, and is there anything that you'd add to that, Abi?
I would say that if you're doing this work, you just need to get used to being pretty uncomfortable. And that's my main takeaway from this. And I remember when I was supporting other trusts too, that was the main thing I used to say to people: get used to being uncomfortable, because you will have to say things to people about their behaviour that you would not normally necessarily be the person who's having that conversation. So if I could give any advice, it would be get a really great coach and some really great support in your organisation. Find the people who think that this is a great idea and talk to them a lot, because a lot of people will say it's not a good idea. People will say you're being too slow. People will say you're not being specific enough about the impact you're going to make. People will tell you, we've done this before, it doesn't change. So support internally is really important, but also support externally from colleagues who are doing this work elsewhere, because this can be pretty lonely. And so, yeah, get some support, talk to your colleagues who are doing this work elsewhere, and make sure you've got the internal support.
Thank you. And I think that's one of the things we want to do through promoting this learning and support network, that actually there are people who are doing this work on the ground, such as you guys, and you can be a really valuable resource for each other. So thank you. And I think one of the things, comment there I've seen from Helen Mancini, who I know is from Nottingham, and we were very sorry that Tracy couldn't join us today. But Helen was basically saying, hold your nerve when it comes to doing this work, hold your nerve. So thank you for that, Helen. There are other questions that we will answer via various channels, social media, and frankly, Lord knows what else. But I just wanted to say, Alfredo and Abi, and indeed Abi's little dog, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I think from what I'm seeing, people have really valued your